Good day to you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 206 titled Predator Badlands Adapt or Die. Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen of the North, South, East, and West, and welcome to another episode of Film Focus. I'm your host, the Hypersonic55, and I'm glad that you decided to join me once again for some film-related discussion. For me, the Predator franchise is a captivating series. The first film from 1987 established a certain look, feel, and atmosphere, and while there's potential to expand or deviate from that initial style, it seems hard to recapture the magic without repeating what's already been done. People want to see the Predator running around and causing chaos in a variety of cool and violent ways, and that concept will always be entertaining. However, that alone cannot sustain an entire film. Just look at the sequels that followed. None of them quite hit the mark. They have been inconsistent until recent years. However, given the quality of Prey and Predator Killer of Killers, I was excited to see what Dan Trachtenberg would bring to the table with Badlands. So, in this episode, I'll be sharing my thoughts on the franchise overall, briefly cover each mainline entry, and then discuss Badlands, and then offer some final reflections on the franchise's future. So, without further ado, let's jump in. So, firstly, let's recap the Predator films prior to Dan Trachtenberg's tenure as director. So, what can be said about the original Predator that hasn't been said already? It's a true classic. Besides those who saw it in the cinema at the time, many others, including myself, watched it on VHS or TV in the 90s, and it has stayed with us ever since. It's such a cool blend of action, sci-fi, and horror with iconic dialogue, scenes, and characters, and established the legendary alien monster now known as the Yautja. Then after that, we had Predator 2, which is an interesting film, coming directly after the original. It doesn't quite match up in terms of the story, characters, and certain scenarios, but it's not without its merits. The move to a city setting is a nice change of scenery. Danny Glover makes for a good protagonist. Bill Paxton is always fun and hilarious, and seeing the Predator kill people still remains fun. Plus, the ending opened up some interesting Predator lore and hinted at the future AVP crossovers. And just so you're aware, there will not be any discussions about AVP or AVP Requiem. Just know that the first film, it's okay, it has its moments, but it's not quite a film for me. And the second film is garbage, and we don't talk about it. Next. So then we fast forward to 2010 with Predators, which is a solid film, though it doesn't quite reach its full potential. It tried to recapture the magic of the original by returning to the jungle setting with a colourful cast of characters. However, they changed things up by placing it on an alien world and featuring multiple predators hunting humans, and also introduced those weird alien dogs as well, among other things. There was a lot to like about it, but again, it just didn't quite hit the mark. And then in 2018, we had The Predator. Shane Black returned to the franchise as the director this time, and on paper, initially it sounded like a good idea. Considering Shane's filmography and style, he felt like a good fit for the franchise, and during the build-up to release, things were going well until you started to hear some reports that surfaced online about the behind-the-scenes difficulties and reshoots, and unfortunately those negative elements became apparent in the final product. The film is not good, and while there were some minor moments of fun watching the Predator hunt humans and some unintentional humor from certain scenarios, the story, characters, pacing, and especially the new mythology that they try to insert into this film, it was awful. It ranged from dull to insulting. And there's a reason why most people have tried to erase this film from their memories. It is that bad. And so, up until this point in the franchise, it's been well established that the Predator film series has been about three main things. One, an alien with highly advanced technology comes to Earth to hunt humans. Two, there's a mixture of action and stealth. And three, it has to be R-rated. or at least over here in the UK we dub it a 15. And those are the core principles established since the first film, and many fans believe they need to be adhered to. And yes, we could continue producing films under those conditions for the foreseeable future with the right creative team. And yeah, that could possibly work. However, that was not reality. Each sequel since 1987 attempted to do something different and push the boundaries of the original film, but they just couldn't quite succeed. After several releases with subpar material, the franchise's strength definitely started to diminish, and it was no longer a reliable product that people trusted or wanted to watch in the modern era. Until 2022. Enter Dan Trachtenberg. Now, before we get into Badlands specifically, I need to summarize the previous two Predator films. As stated before, in 2022, that's when we got our newest entry in the Predator series known as Prey. Now, this film carried a certain amount of excitement but also trepidation. It was the first film since The Predator, and it released directly onto streaming and also featured a female protagonist. That latter point caused a bit of a fuss online from some silly internet users. Nevertheless, when it was released, it became a big hit. It felt like a return to basics with the Predator hunting humans, but also the setting, time period, main character, and the inclusion of her indigenous tribe and their culture offered a fresh and distinctive perspective for the franchise. And man, you don't know how happy I was to see that film during that summer, and I was just like, I'm so happy that this film doesn't suck and it's actually competent. It's really well made. It looks good. Naru was a really fun protagonist, and I was just elated. I was like, yo, we can only go up from here. And then there was the next entry, which was an unexpected surprise in the form of Predator Killer of Killers. While waiting for the then upcoming Badlands to be released in November this year, again out of nowhere, Killer of Killers was announced and then released to streaming in the summer. And mate, it was just wild. This film, like the previous entry Prey, was bringing a lot of firsts to the franchise, including its status as the first anthology story for the series, where we had the first set of stories told within those different eras, and it was also the first venture into animation as well. So there was definitely some apprehension for certain fans with it being, animated and featuring these different time periods that we hadn't seen before. And people were just wondering if this would be able to do justice to the franchise coming off of Prey. And the film was so good. While there was definitely some debate to be had about the length of the stories and the quality of them, and there was some quibbles that you could have about the animation when it came to the flow and motion at times, when the film hits, it hits hard. It remains bloody and violent, but also has a distinctive art style. The quality of the animation is really good, and the stories were very intriguing, featuring the different characters involved. And while the trailers give you an indication of what the film is, there's a little bit more going on with it when you see it as its overall thing. So once you go through these stories, you're thinking, okay, this interesting, but then once you see how everything sort of wraps up, you're like, oh, I see, okay, that's pretty cool. And for those who, obviously have seen it after the summer, there was an extra bit of animated goodness added to the end, which presented some very interesting new lore and possibilities for the future of the franchise. But either way, it was really good. And all this is to suggest that Dan Trachtenberg's approach to the Predator blueprint seems to be that he's examined it and asked, how do I change things up in a satisfying way? He has a clear vision and has been permitted to implement it, and the results seem to speak for themselves. And now we move on to the Badlands discussion. So it's been just over a month since Predator Badlands released in cinemas, and yeah, I had hoped to have my discussion about the film out at least at maximum 2 weeks afterwards, but I did require a little bit more time to refine the script for this episode, and honestly, life things just happen, so it pushed me back a little bit. But yeah, Badlands, I saw on opening night, and my initial feelings about it were clear yet mixed. There is a lot to like about this film. However, there were some minor issues here and there that prevented it from being more enjoyable. That said, after watching the film a week afterwards, I appreciated it a lot more. And while it still remains my third favourite film in the recent set of Predator films, it does mark a bold new entry for the franchise. Now, in case you're not aware of what the film is about, I'll just give you a short summary. The story of Badlands involves Dek, a young Yautja who is exiled from his clan and crash lands on a hostile planet and has to prove himself worthy by killing an apex predator. This leads him to form an unlikely alliance with Thea, an android from the Weyland-Yutani Corporation. And then you get to see their little shenanigans as they go on this interesting adventure together. And that's a way for me to summarize the plot without going into the area of spoilers. Now, Badlands introduced many new and interesting elements to the franchise, like, firstly, featuring the alien as the protagonist. Secondly, focuses on the Yautja culture. And thirdly, also incorporates the Weyland-Yutani Corporation from the Alien universe. All of this leads to numerous exciting and unique situations and story beats that we've never encountered before. And while it's not groundbreaking storytelling, it does allow long-term fans to see the franchise do things differently with the protagonist and learn more about the Yautja culture in far more depth than anything that's been shown beforehand. Also, the story unfolds with more nuance and care than one might expect, and also features unexpected humor and levity. Some of the humor was funny, other parts of it I could have done without. Your mileage may vary depending on, who you are and how you choose to receive, humor in certain franchises. I also appreciated the themes and the way the film explored the lone warrior struggles, the burdens of expectations, and the forging of unlikely alliances during dangerous situations. This film is also about choices and consequences and trying to find a new way to proceed when, the old ways don't work. And when it comes to the cast, it's probably the smallest cast of any Predator film so far, where you only have to focus in on a handful of characters. But the main character, Dek, played by Demetrius Schuster Kolomatungi, at least I think that's how you say his name. I'm sorry if I butchered it. He is quite different from the previous Yautja that we've seen. He's very engaging, proud, sassy, but also sympathetic and intriguing. I remember when the character was first shown in the first trailer that dropped online, and many were not kind about Dek's design. However, the film addressed this pretty early on, showing that he's not your average predator. He is young, he's the grunt of the group, and has a lot to prove, not only to himself but also his family. And watching his journey throughout the film, you genuinely root for him and want to see him succeed. Additionally, Elle Fanning, who plays Thea, but also plays Tessa, she ends up being another individual in the Alien franchise, much like Michael Fassbender before her, does a great job of playing two synths. Thea is the positive, upbeat, and delightful individual who's clever and capable, but not without her flaws, hence why she only has half a body. And when she runs into Dek, the two share a unique dynamic that's equal parts cool, weird, and hilarious. And watching their relationship evolve over the course of the story is captivating. Whereas you have Tessa, who is way more cold, efficient, and is all about the job. I liked her demeanor compared to Thea, and seeing how her role played out in the film was pretty good as well. You also have Bud, the alien creature that happens to tag along during the adventure, and Bud has some really fun moments, but again, I could understand why certain people weren't keen on the character because yes, it definitely had that sort of playful, here's a, pet for the children to be attached to, and some people compared Bud to Grogu from The Mandalorian, and to a degree I could understand those sentiments considering some of the humorous situations that Bud found herself in, but yeah, she's definitely way more capable than some people gave her credit for, and she contributed to the film in a good way from what I saw. And then there's the presentation, which is fairly well executed. Visually, this film is large in scale, diverse, and filled with violence and chaos. There is a blend of practical and digital effects, and the CGI for Deck, most of the other creatures, the environments, and weaponry is pretty impressive. Although I will say that parts of the planet Genna seemed somewhat familiar to Earth and lacked a few more unique elements here and there that would have made it feel a little bit more distinct and, otherworldly. And other times there were points where the CGI for some of the action scenes seemed a little weightless or less refined, but otherwise the presentation was clean, looked really good. And the film also has one of the most interesting title drops I've seen in a film for a while. It definitely just stood out, and I was like, yo, okay, this film's making a statement, and I'm here for it. And then you have the film score by Sarah Schachner and Benjamin Wolfish. They worked together to create a really interesting sound for Badlands. The music was dark, ominous, gritty in atmosphere, and had these cool combinations of orchestral elements along with electronic sounds as well. And Schachner in particular introduced these really cool droning sort of vocals underneath that some people related to like sort of Viking kind of sounds. And some people said that the score had some similarities to Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I've not played the game or heard any of the music, but by the accounts that I've read online, she did a good job with that. But I'm only aware of her work from Prey, which I thought was pretty good, but her music in this film is pretty good, as is Wolfish's. Wolfish is definitely one of my favorite composers of the last 5 to 10 years. His work in It, Mortal Kombat, and a few other films here and there have been pretty good. But the song in particular, Deck of the Yautja, which was utilized towards the latter side of the film, is one of my new favorite pieces that's in my film score rotations on Spotify. So yeah, man, it's such a cool sound, which is very, very different from the classic compositions of Alan Silvestri from the 80s, but it is very compelling and works very well for the film. So hats off to them both. They created a really good sound. So in conclusion, Badland feels like a natural step forward for the franchise. The core elements are in place, but the story, structure, tone, and character development have been adjusted to be more accessible and attract a wider audience beyond the 15/R rating. Some people dislike the change, and that's perfectly fine. You're free to like what you like. However, there comes a point when watching the same thing repeatedly becomes dull and a fresh approach is needed, and Predator definitely needed that shake-up. Now, nothing can remain the same forever, and for a franchise to succeed, it needs to adapt. And I also believe that Badlands is emblematic of the franchise and its desire to break away from tradition and try to do something new and unexpected. Now, I'm not claiming that the reception for Badlands was entirely positive. There have definitely been some complaints. From the change to the PG-13/12A rating, to the humor, to the alien sidekick Bud, who again has been described as being, this version of Grogu from The Mandalorian. And there's also the sentiment online that this film is yet another victim of the Disneyfication of a franchise. While some of those elements I can understand and agree with to a degree, some of which I think is just blown out of proportion and a bit exaggerated. Even though this film wasn't able to, double up his budget from the 105 million that was used to make the film, it's currently sitting, from what I can see online, at the 181 million mark. I feel like there's enough positivity and goodwill about this film that you'll be able to see at least more than one type of Predator film coming out in the future. We could see more adventures with Deck and his crew, but we could also see more of the traditional violent 15/R rated kind of Predator films in the future. Again, what we're seeing now is this interesting place for the franchise where we could go in any direction and could make it work if we utilize the right people. So I say Predator, adapt, continue to do new and interesting things, and hopefully we'll get some good stuff in the future. And now I turn it over to you, ladies and gentlemen. How do you feel about Predator Badlands, but also the Predator franchise as a whole? Do you feel like things are progressing in a good direction, or are you concerned that we're definitely falling down a well that we will no longer be able to escape from in terms of a not so good product? Let me know in the comment section below, or hit me up on Twitter where we are at Hypersonic55 or at FilmFocus55. I know I said we, I just mean me. Obviously, we're on Instagram and TikTok as well. And the podcast can be found on anywhere where you get podcasts. So, YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, and all those other places. And hopefully I'll still have at least a few other episodes to drop for the podcast before the year is out. But until then, thank you for listening as always. And until the next time, this is the Hypersonic 55 signing out. Peace.